Well, better late than never, right?
Oh my god.
Hang on!
Ethan!
Go, go, go!
Welcome back to Actors Review. Today we're talking about Dead Reckoning Part 1. Yes, this is a two-part finale for the Mission Impossible series. This has been going on for a very long time, and actually within the last year I've watched all of the Mission Impossibles. Not necessarily even in anticipation for this film, but I think it was pretty helpful for me to gauge how this film fits into the saga that is Mission Impossible. And honestly, the driving force of this movie is Tom Cruise. It always has been, and luckily it stayed faithful in this particular film as well. Now, that's not to say that the cast of this doesn't deserve major praise, because honestly I feel like the director and the casting director and everybody involved, all the producers, made really good choices moving into the final two films of this multi-decade saga. But obviously you have Tom Cruise, you have Haley Atwell, Ving Rhames has been in all the movies, Simon Pegg, Rebecca Ferguson is always a welcome addition, Vanessa Kirby. There's just a huge cast, and if I were to go through it all, it would take up the whole thing. But I mentioned just kind of the top build that are in order here, and honestly, there's a ton. There's a ton more that I'm not going to go through. There was a lot of recalls, I will say, to the original Mission Impossible film. And for me, this was cool, and it was also a little bit frustrating, and I'm going to explain why. So let's kind of go through the good, the bad, and the ugly of Dead Reckoning, kind of show you what I think about it, and just starting from a story perspective, because that is the foundation of every single movie, is the story good? Is the antagonist good? Is the protagonist good? So we already know who the protagonist is, right? And they kind of weave these stories in such a way where you end up being the protagonist. You kind of are. Tom Cruise is kind of this avatar on this crazy adventure where you feel all of the hurts, all of the laughs, all of the good, the bad, and the ugly that Tom Cruise goes through. And I really enjoy that about these films. I feel like they've made Tom Cruise a really likable and relatable avatar so that you can go through this movie with him and feel all the emotions that he does. And then Tom Cruise puts in a great performance in pretty much every single movie he's in, right? Like, he's clearly passionate about what he does. He hasn't slowed down after doing this for 40 some odd years. Like, he's still in love with the process, and he's still really, really good at what he does. He's one of the last true movie stars, and I think I'm not alone in saying that. So Tom is a great avatar. We go through this journey with him, and the story is really good, actually. After the first scene, I even wrote in my notes, like, I'm hooked. I'm compelled. And essentially they set up this villain who is, if you haven't already seen it, which I know I'm late to the review, I'm very late to the review. I filmed this like 6 times, and I was just never happy with it. So in the film, and probably, you know, throughout the next one as well, this villain is really an artificial intelligence that essentially is starting to become sentient, right? And I don't think that's spoiling it. You can get that from the trailer, so hopefully I'm not spoiling the film for you, but they do put kind of a person's face to it, which I think is an interesting twist, and I think it was something that was necessary, because how do you fight the internet, right? Like, how do you fight the cloud? So putting a face to it and having this person be a puppet for the AI was a really good idea. Not to mention the person is significant within the overall kind of lore that is the Mission Impossible universe. So I will say I feel like they've done a really good job with the story here. The action set pieces are what you would expect. There's major car chases. There's Tom Cruise running. There's a lot of Tom Cruise running in this film. Maybe not as much as some of the others, but he runs a lot in this film. You get the obligatory sprinting scene, and he sprints for a long time. So don't worry, you're going to get your Tom Cruise running scenes. Even into his 60s, this man can still really run. I mean, it's pretty impressive. And I will say, as far as like cinematography and the things that kind of slowed the film down for me a little bit, where it starts off with a bang, it starts off really compelling, they set the stage really, really well. But into the second act, which is where most movies slow down, into the second act, they're doing a lot of funky camera work. And I've noticed this a lot in films recently, where the visual storytelling is, you know, a really big part of what I look at as a filmmaker, because, you know, I do this professionally. So it's, when I see camera movements, if it's something's pushing in, it's creating tension, it's drawing you into that character's emotions. If it's pulling out, it's showing separation from the character. And in the original Mission Impossible, they did a lot of Dutch angles, which is basically you take the camera and you turn it on axis, and the character is like crooked in the frame. They did this in Mission Impossible, and what that normally signifies is someone feeling out of place, someone feeling confused, someone feeling shock, disorientation, right? So it's a visual storytelling technique, and in the second act of this film, they go into a club. Again, I don't want to spoil it for you, but they use a lot of Dutch angles in this one scene. And if you were to use like 2 or 3, it really tells a story, and it's interesting and it's intriguing, but it's almost like 60-70% of the shots in this one pretty long section, and it honestly like was making me sick to my stomach. It was just too much Dutch angle. And I know what they were trying to do because the scene is really confusing and everybody's kind of going back and forth and you don't really know who's right, wrong, or indifferent. So I know why they did it, but for me personally, it slowed the film down and it kind of made me like almost queasy. It was like really weird and it was disorienting. So I think if that was their goal, that they accomplished it. However, for me, it was a little too much. I think they probably could have toned down 20-30% of the Dutch angles, and it might have told the story a little bit cleaner so that everybody could follow along with it and there was no confusion. But that was only one part of the film. The rest of it was rock solid cinematography-wise. Obviously, the directing of the actors is done very, very well. There's action, 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 and then you get this levity, right? And I really love how they pace these Mission Impossible movies, because you do have moments where like the tension's getting pretty serious and these characters are feeling like, okay, we're in big trouble, and then they do throw in some physical comedy, or they throw in a nice jab at somebody, or what have you, right? So there are those moments of levity. The pacing is really, really good outside of maybe that middle act, that second act having a little bit of kind of rough areas. So it's not a perfect movie, but Tom Cruise really pulls this movie in. I really feel like Haley Atwell was a perfect compliment to Tom Cruise's character. She is a conniving thief, and you don't know whether to trust her or to love her or to hate her. And I think they did a really, really good job with that. So I think overall, this movie was very solid for me. And I was impressed through the whole first act. I was like really drawn in. The second act slowed down a little bit, but the conclusion ended with a big bang. And of course, we get that big motorcycle stunt. And by the way, I want to mention this. Tom Cruise jumped off that cliff on a motorcycle. He did it like 6 times in real life. They ended up using the first take, which is hilarious in my opinion. However, he also did several other motorcycle jumps throughout the movie, and they're smaller. You know, he's jumping 30, 40 feet sometimes, maybe only 20 feet. However, this man is in his 60s, and he's doing these jumps. It's very clear that he's doing them all, and he's riding this dirt bike with pretty great precision. And I just got to give him so much credit. The fight scenes were really good. This guy can still freaking move. And I'm impressed, right? I do my own stunts. I've done my own fight choreography. Some of you know that I'm a 3rd-degree black belt in Taekwondo. I did live shows for many years traveling with Team Pilsung. Like, this is my wheelhouse. Action is my wheelhouse and adventure. And Tom Cruise at 60 years old is incredibly impressive. So for that alone, I have to give this movie an extra point. And really, this is like a 7.6, 7.7. Like, it's a solid movie, right? For me, that's really good. But Tom Cruise's enthusiasm and go-gettedness and willingness to just put it all on the line brings this up to an 8.8. I have to recommend this movie. If you can see it in theaters, please go see it. That's how Tom wants you to see it in theaters. So if you haven't seen it yet, check it out. And 8.8 is very, very solid. So hats off to Tom and the whole team. Fantastic job. I'm excited for Dead Reckoning Part 2. Can they continue the magic? Let's hope so. I'll see you in the next video.